everyone, and welcome back. I'm Namin at Bondtech, and now we're gonna configure our routed K1, K1 Max or K1C for our LGX Lite PRO and X-axis upgrade. First, we're gonna calibrate the shaper in order to see what the upgrade did to the resonance in the system. So, as we talked about previously, make sure your printer is resting on a stable surface to ensure the graphs are showing the resonance of the machine itself more than the surface it's resting on. As we can see, there is a huge amount of vibration reduction in the X-axis graph. This means small details will be sharper and surface finish will be smoother. Now we're going to apply these settings as well as changing some other key parameters in order to make sure that the extruder is performing as it should. So we will change the shaper frequency to the values with the least amount of vibrations while still keeping the shaping to a minimum. We are also gonna set the maximum acceleration to the recommended value for the chosen shaper in order to see what it does to the test print. And here we will change the rotation distance for the LGX Lite PRO. Currently 0.55, so we can keep that one. Again, we are going to print the same test file as the one we printed in the previous chapter, where we can observe how the printer is performing after the upgrade. If you look at this gap and compare it to the print with the stock setup, you can see we have now closed this gap a lot more. This is due to the smoothing number being smaller from our X-axis upgrade, and also take notice in decreased ringing on the print as compared to the one before. The decreased ringing comes from the shaper now being able to identify the resonant frequency. This is one of the benefits this upgrade kit brings, aside from increased flow rate, ease of use, and of course the reliability of a genuine Bondtech upgrade.